People are starting to wake up and realize there's something wrong with the planet. There's weird things happening. There's extreme weather again and again and again, and people just are starting to wake up to it.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
We can talk about each one of these weather events. Let's talk about the human side of it. During this 3 years of research, I've been contacting all the industry leaders, everyone who's putting this information out, with essentially a call to action. Whereas there's a large number of people who don't need any more convincing, right? We understand, got it. There's something happening. We all agree that this solar minimum is on the way. So we don't need any more severe weather news and updates, and we don't need any more signs and symptoms. What's the next step? And so I saw a void in the industry for the next step. A lot of people, including you talk about it, but I'm putting out a call to action right now. I'm putting out a call to action where it's time to step up and protect yourself, because no one's going to come in and protect you. You only have one life to live, and that's it. There is nothing on this planet more important than your ability to put food in your mouth 3 times a day. That's it. So I went through Ranger School in 2003. I know what hunger feels like. I felt those hunger pains in Ranger School where I wouldn't eat, for days and days and days. And, I know what hunger feels like. And I know what people are like when they're hungry. I know how moody they are, right? And that's just an army school. What if there's no prospect of food the next day or the next day or the next day? What would you do to quench that hunger? People will do anything to make that pain go away. I've heard stories about people eating their own tongues when they're, stranded out at sea. So hunger is a motivator. So, what I'm doing now is I'm putting out a call to action. I'm challenging you. I realize I've been trying to lead from the rear, and that's not how leadership works. Right? Leaders lead from the front. What have I done? Let me lead by example. Well, I've created this one-of-a-kind lecture. I'm contacting local preparedness groups. I conducted 2 lectures to these groups. I'm being flown to Texas to talk with a group of very influential and wealthy business owners, business executives. I'm talking with another group so people can hear me talk and understand what's going on. This little niche where I can explain it to people. I will travel and I will talk to people and I will tell them, hey, listen, this is what you need to do, and here's why, and here's a quick rundown, step 1 through 30 of what's happening, and then here's what you need to do next. So once the information's been received, once you understand it, well, then it's time to take action because the clock is ticking. Just like you said, it is on the way. This is the winter where those who are paying attention will have their final confirmation. And as with that final confirmation, I also had my own final confirmation. I realized this is really happening. This is truly happening. This is when I launched my website, my speaking campaign. I'm on David DuByne's show. Within a month and a half. So it's the call to action. It's challenging you. It's time to talk to your neighbors. It's time to talk to your friends and family. You can download that presentation on my website. I have it available for $10 download on my website. I want to give it away for free. If you can't afford $10, well then shoot me an email and I'll give it to you, because everybody needs to know this information. If it's for free right now, then people will deem it as having no value because it's free. So it's $10. Like I said, if you want it, I'll give it to you. Just email me. Use this presentation, right? Print it up. Sit down in front of your family. Turn off the TV. Print this up and show them step by step by step. Because what I've realized is the order of information presented is essential for a thorough comprehension. And that's the goal, is comprehension, right?
And if you thought changes like these were limited to today's world, The Fate of Rome, Climate, Disease, and the End of an Empire. This book is a sweeping new history of how climate change and disease helped bring down the Roman Empire. An interweaving grand historical narrative with climate science, the fate of Rome was decided not by emperors, soldiers, and barbarians, but also volcanic eruptions, solar cycles, climate instability, and devastating viruses.
I've been barfing science at people for 3 years, spilling out information about cosmic rays and wave theories and this and this and this. But what I realized is I'm all over the place. I was almost manic in the way I was putting this information out because I knew the story in my head, but I couldn't find the right words to put it together in a format that's understood. So that's what this format is. It's a presentation. It's 70-page PowerPoint presentation, and sit down with your families, sit down with your local preparedness groups, contact industry leaders of wherever you are, your mayors or city commissioners, and hey, listen, let's talk about what's happening. I have this information. It's easily digestible. It's heavy science that's presented in a format that's very easy. That's my call to action. That's what I've done. I'm leading from the front. You need a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C because you can't expect your plan to work. What we learned very quickly in my military experience is the best laid plans go to waste as soon as the first bullet's fired. You can't plan your way through a firefight because it's a dynamic environment. Everything changes immediately. So you have to have contingency plans upon contingency plans. It's vitally important that we work together through this because no one's going to get through this by themselves. We need to work together as a community.
Yeah, I would agree. And then the different types of information that you can glean or talk to people around your local communities. There's ag communities at universities, government-sponsored agricultural co-op programs in almost every city in the United States that can tell you what grows locally. How about going to the farmer's market? I had some great traction at the farmer's market I went to. But do you know where the food distribution center is in your city? I just simply mean every day when they bring bulk foods into the city, where are they stored? Who's in that whole supply chain that you might be able to barter or move along with, trade something to be able to secure food? Because the further you are away from that food supply chain, the more dangerous you're living. You also want to be able to create value by giving them information, because a lot of those ladies and guys inside the food industry themselves are unaware of what's going on. And if you told them what was happening, they would be very open to it because that affects their livelihood. They're not going to dismiss you and say, oh, that's stupid. Those people are very smart, and they're looking for the next edge on what can help them succeed and thrive in their own business environment. They're not going to dismiss that. And government's also a little trick for you. If you call a representative or if you send an email to your local representative, and I don't care if it's city, state, or whatever it might be, representatives in the Congress and Senate, etc., if you hand write them a letter, type it and put it in an envelope, real paper, they legally, by law, have to open it. They don't have to open or respond to an email. They don't have to return any phone calls legally. But they do legally have to open every single letter. 100% of all physical mail received at those offices must be open. They must be read. They must be cataloged, and then they must be answered. So at least you're going to get somebody's ears a couple of steps down the way there. Now, maybe it's a clerk at the office who says, whoa, I didn't know this. Maybe it's the actual person that you're trying to reach, the mayor or governor or whoever it is. Business associations, how many Lions clubs, Rotary clubs are out there with people that also have access to resources. But again, they're very smart people. They want the edge to see the future. And this is where we're going. It's all about talking about the future. And this is a lot of information that nobody's ever heard before. I've had so many conversations where they say, well, that is the first time I ever heard that. That's incredibly interesting. I'll look into it. And once they do, they always come back and say, hey, think we could go out for coffee, or can I call you on the phone and talk more about it, because you know something that I just learned about, but you've been doing it for over half a decade now. So what do you know, really? And there's a lot of traction out there. So start local. Go up to the local nursery where you buy plants. How many of you have been to the nursery to talk to the persons running that? How about the local farm community? There's everywhere you go, there's a step in the food supply chain locally around where you are that you can get into and also give these same presentations. When I go home this summer, I'm going to be doing some of the same. But there's a lot of receptivity to this message because now this lexicon of Grand Solar Minimum, I was the same way. I was throwing out the science verbiage and, hey, Grand Solar Minimum, there's a decline in solar activity in the magnetosphere and the magnetic wandering poles. And people would look at you like deer in the headlights. Are you speaking English? So
yeah.
It's very much like that. You got to bring it down into simple usage words that people can understand. Okay, the sun, sometimes it's stronger and sometimes it's weaker. But again, 11 years, it does that 11 years, and we know that one. But you know what? There's a longer cycle too. Every 400 years, it does the same thing, but it's even more intense. And that's a good way to get it instead of say, well, decline in solar activity based on Birkeland currents and the plasma field sheath inputs. You lose them right there.
Right. That's tough. One thing that I think really helps me, that gives me an advantage, is that my wife, her native language isn't English. And she still has a hard time sometimes understanding things just because she doesn't understand, certain phrases or whatever in English. So I find myself often having to describe something from multiple angles. I'll have to say it one way, then a different way, then another way, until I talk 4 times about whatever thing, but I have to say it different ways. I've changed the way I talk since I've been married to her. I explain things more thoroughly, and I'm very direct, and I use the simplest form of language so she can understand it. So I think I view this the same way. Whereas I'm talking, a foreign language to people when I'm talking about, CMEs or, Birkeland currents, I see the look on people's faces. I see the wrinkles on their forehead, and I see the head turn, and I realize I am way off the mark. I've lost them. So I explain this the way I explain it to my mom. This is math we're talking about. And mathematics is the language of the universe. Physicists and theoretical physicists write equations to describe how to understand the universe. So 1 + 1 = 2 anywhere you go. 1 + 1 = 2 on any planet. It's the same everywhere you go. It's just how you describe it to people. It's the delivery is very important. And the order of information presented, it's very important. Because like we talked about early on, it's such a gigantic story that how do you talk about, everything.
TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Just a couple of days ago, I was doing actually a rehearsal for this exact interview where I did a live broadcast with a couple friends. And in an attempt to be brief, I just wanted to say, this is my understanding, my background, and this is the punchline. Well, what I realized I did was I gave the punchline, but it didn't make sense. So I had to back up a little bit, and then I couldn't explain that right, and I had to back up a little more. I told the story in reverse. I told the story exactly step-by-step in reverse. Myself in the live feed video, I thought it was hilarious. That's how my brain worked, is it's a step-by-step process, and I step-by-step did it in reverse. So in order to truly understand it, the way I describe it is it's like learning calculus. You must first understand what are numbers. Okay, well then let's understand what's addition and subtraction. Then let's understand algebra. Then let's understand calculus. My entire lecture, it's 70-page PowerPoint presentation, but the punchline of the presentation is only 3 slides. That's the punchline. That's it, 3 slides. But in order for those 3 slides to have the weight and the impact that they deserve, you need context. You need to understand history. You need to understand what is a sunspot. Basic, this is the foundation. That's how you build a pyramid, lay out a big foundation. So it is very challenging to give this information. And like I said, my hat goes off to you and I mean, all the other presenters from doing this for years. Diamond over at the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time, and I mean, it is difficult to do what you do. When I explain this story, I'm mentally and physically just exhausted after I do this because my brain, it's an effort not to just barf out all the information. I have to present it at a slow drip, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and I can't take off on all these other tangents. It's step by step by step in a methodical process, and that's the most logical way to understand this, where it's such a difficult to understand topic.
Well, when you talk about the construct of the universe, so mainly vibration and frequency, I mean, you can break down the changes in the sun to that same thing. You know, people understand vibration, whatever it is that makes a vibration, and then frequency, people can hear louder sounds, higher pitches, etc. I mean, it's the same construct of the universe. Nikola Tesla talks about this routinely, is to understand the workings of the universe, you're going to need to understand 3, 6, and 9 as the numerology and the numbers inside there. But then the other layers within that are vibration and frequency. So that's what's changing in the sun. The frequency is changing. So as that frequency changes, we're going to have huge effects on the psyche of the human population of this planet. And we're starting to see that right now. So more people are just aware of something being wrong. So if you've noticed, there's a lot more people looking for information at the moment than there were a couple of years ago or even last year. So you and I both agree and concur that this year and next are going to be the pivotal ahas for hundreds of millions, if not billions of people over the next year and a half or so. And at that point, once it's in the consciousness, truly the consciousness of us here on the planet in terms of the mass population, that it's not a 1 or 2 day event like you spoke of. If you don't eat for 1 or 2 days, you know, there's a hurricane or an earthquake, you know it's going to end because you know relief supplies are coming. You know for sure there's going to be relief organizations. There'll be some army. There'll be military in there delivering. There'll be relief organizations there. You can go to a station and you can get some supplies, food, water, medicine, whatever it might be, if you can just get there because you know that's available. Like you just know it. But in this whole thing, it's going to be a prolonged, over a decade-long event. And there's going to be no respite even after the 3rd year, the 4th year, the 5th year is when it's really going to get intense. So every year moving forward, it's going to get more intense until we reach that bottom point of A, cooling, and B, lack of crops being grown globally. And this is where we get into this whole protection thing. If you can't eat, you can't thrive. If you can't eat, you can't even think straight. If you can't eat, you don't have enough energy to go out and start growing your own food, taking care of animals, helping others, prepare storage for foods. There's so many other things to think about that you need calories to do. So as we move forward, the psyche of the world wakes up and they realize, oh no, what is going on? We got to do this thing for how many years now? 15? 20? Oh, right. Wow. That is a hugely different mind frame. You can watch an enormous amount of people selling their stocks at that moment. They're going to be cashing in their bonds, IRAs, whatever it is. The money's going to come flowing out of the market as people try to get ready for this, to buy anything they can at today's prices. And I think this is one of the reasons that the economy declines by some 90%, during these events. Just routinely, the economic decline percentages on a grand solar minimum, at least through the last that are really mappable, Maunder minimum, Wolf minimum, Oort minimum. This takes us back to around 800 AD or so. There's quite a lot of good records from that point forward. But you'll find one thing routinely: the economy collapses and shrinks literally 90%. And you got to realize that those people were involved in agriculture. Mainly at that time in this world, it was an agricultural-based economy anyway. So you're talking about what the information was not there with the Black Death, like, why they bought more candles. You explained that to me. I'd like you to explain it again to everybody here. But the missing information is it was an agrarian-based society, and the economy declined by 90% every single time over those 3. So that's the baseline, 90% decline. This time we're in a technology economy, not an agro economy. But it really shows you if they knew how to repair, they knew how to grow, everybody knew basic skills of survival, but they still had such a giant reduction in population and economy. We have a lot of really positive things with us. We have better technology, communication, all these things with us in the modern era. But We don't know how to grow food. So this one's going to be a little bit different than the last three, but look for economic declines and population declines for sure, and mass migration of people to other warmer climes, if you will.
What we don't realize is how fragile we are. I mean, we are a fragile species. I mean, we think we're masters of the universe because we have automobiles and we have the internet and we can go to the grocery store and buy food, but we're fragile. If we don't eat food, we die. If we don't drink water, we die. If we fall from a great distance, we die. If we get stabbed, we die. I mean, we stand in the cold for too long, we die. I mean, we are fragile beings, and we've lost sight of how truly fragile we are. And technology has made us weak, best way to put it. So part of understanding what's happening is you need to understand history and understand what happened in the past. So history is a great guide to see how fragile we are in comparison to our ancestors. So we can look at the Maunder Minimum, the early 1600s. I talk about this in the lecture. Let's put yourself in the perspective of the people who raised their hand and said, you know what, I volunteer to jump on this ship, sail across the ocean, and go to this new land that I have no experience with. So these people were hardened settlers. These people knew how to grow food. They knew how to store food throughout the winter, build tools, make tools to chop down trees, to build houses and forts and fortify their positions, and they knew how to conduct fieldcraft and first aid. I mean, these people, survival was a way of life. That's just how they lived. If they didn't have good crops, well, they starved. You can look at the first year the settlers arrived, and of the first 100 settlers, only 32 or 34 survived the first winter. That's catastrophic.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.